Good morning. It is wonderful to see all your smiling faces and those joining us virtually. I am your worship leader. My name is Chris Zanoni, and I serve on the Personnel, Communications, and Membership Ministries. One thing I love about this congregation is a combination of connection and community. And I'm seeing a couple of familiar faces who were also at the Conference on World Affairs at CU this weekend. And for me, it was just amazing to get to hear people talk about this subject and see people I recognize in this congregation who have a shared interest. And the fact that we are in a larger community where the University of Colorado puts on an event like that. So that was just, again, a sense of community and connection. So, and then also, let us not forget our friends in the Climate Action Ministry and the wonderful local connection we have with this important work. So that's what it says to me. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. I want to take a moment to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's visiting us for the first time. And if you're joining us online, please fill out a visitor form in the link in the description. We would love to connect with you. Part of our mission is to connect bravely, and we're glad that you're sharing part of your Sunday as we're all here together. Many of us were once, too, seeking for something larger than ourselves, to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do that well here, though not perfectly. In this congregation, we strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. Whether it's your first time here in worship with us, or your 100th time, or maybe even more, we hope that you'll find here questions that stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious values that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. I have two announcements for you today. Next week is our Earth Day service, April 23rd. After that, the Climate Action Ministry team is hosting a vegetarian luncheon, and you're all warmly invited. If you'd like to provide a dish or to help out, please sign up at the Climate Action table during coffee hour out in the Sky Room. And then Sunday, May 7th, is our next membership class from 12:30 to 2:30. If you're interested in exploring membership, we'd love to see you there. Talk with Irene at the welcome table after the service for more information.
Do the stories we tell reflect the world as it truly is, or did we simply start off with the wrong story? This is Thomas King who asks it, a storyteller. He continues, he says, what if the creation story in Genesis, what if it had featured a flawed deity who was understanding and sympathetic rather than autocratic and rigid? Someone who, in the process of creation, found herself lost from time to time and in need of advice. Someone who was willing to accept a little help with the more difficult decisions. What if Adam and Eve had simply been admonished for their foolishness? I love you, God could have said, but I'm not happy with your behavior. Let's talk this over. Try to do better next time. What kind of world, says Thomas King, what kind of world could we have created with that kind of a story? Stories of the end of the world, stories of apocalypse, offer possibilities for different kinds of futures for our climate crisis, for our climate apocalypse. And when we talk about a climate apocalypse, it's a religious analogy. And there isn't just one version of apocalypse to tell. So many traditions have end-of-the-world narratives. You are going to get so much apocalypse this morning. Aztec and Buddhist and Scandinavian and Christian. And the choice of which apocalypse we mean when we say climate apocalypse, it's not incidental, it's not innocuous, it's world-shaping. Because despite the way some Christian traditions read the book of Revelation as prediction, for us, all of these stories of apocalypse are powerful not because they are future histories, that are inevitably going to come to pass, but because they are invitations to imagine what our orientation will be to the apocalypse unfolding around us right now. Climate apocalypse is not in the future. It's already in the past and the present. Half of all life on land is already gone. This is not something that's coming. Half of all life in the seas, half of all algae, half of all coral reefs have already died. Who shall we be as an old world dies and a new one is born? Who can we be when we tell apocalyptic stories? We're mapping this landscape of possibility. Which apocalypse are we part of? And what will that story ask us to do? To get depressed or to go to work? Or both or neither? Will you rise in body or spirit? Let's open in song. Let me tell you about the end of the world. Let me tell you about the end of the world with apologies for my mispronunciations along the way. In Aztec belief, pre-conquest, the world in which we live, this world, is the fifth iteration of humanity. The sun overhead is the fifth sun that's been in the sky, and the gods created and destroyed each of the four previous worlds. But the survival of our fifth sun, Earth, is never guaranteed, and this sun, too, will perish without the nourishing energy of sacrifice we humans provide. Out of the void, before all things, the first God created himself and gave birth to four children who were the four directions. When yet all was in darkness, when yet no sun had shone and no dawn had broken, the gods gathered themselves at the city of Teotihuacan. And they spoke, who will bring it upon themselves to be the sun, to bring the dawn? To become the sun, they chose Tezcatlipoca, god of the north, god of wind and beauty, of conflict and rulership. But he is the god of night, whose sign is obsidian, and he gave only half the light that a sun should. So his brother Quetzalcoatl, god of the west, of wind and dawn, god of crafts and knowledge, knocked him down from the sky. And in the darkness, jaguars ate everyone still alive. Quetzalcoatl became the second sun, and the gods created humans a second time. But because humanity did not give proper respect to their creators, Tezcatlipoca, who is god of judgment as well as night and conflict, turned humanity into monkeys as punishment. Quetzalcoatl swept the monkeys off the earth with a great wind and stepped down from the sky, done with being the sun. He created a new people, and the rain god Tlaloc became the new sun. But when Tezcatlipoca slept with Tlaloc's wife, Tlaloc's grief captured him, and despondent and passive, drought dried the world. And at last the incessant human prayers for rain turned Tlaloc's melancholy into rage, and he rained fire over all the world until it was ash. The gods made a fourth earth from the remains, and Tlaloc's new wife, Chalchiuhtlicue, became the fourth sun. She was kind and affectionate to humanity until Tezcatlipoca said that her compassion was performative, that all this care and generosity and kindness was just an act to cover up an uncaring heart. And so for 52 years she cried tears of blood until all of humanity drowned and stepped down from the sky. Well, the gods gathered again, and many sacrificed themselves so that Huitzilopochtli, god of the south, god of war, who carries the fire serpent club, could become the sun. Quetzalcoatl went down to the underworld and stole the bones of humanity that were left and bathed them in his own blood to bring them alive again and repopulate the earth. So here we are on the fifth earth, but history hasn't ended. The moon goddess and the stars, jealous of the bright day, war against the fifth sun. And humanity sustains Huitzilopochtli through sacrifice of the sacred energy of our blood. And to fail in that sacrificial responsibility means the fifth sun will be defeated, and in the darkness which follows, earthquakes will destroy the whole earth. The apocalypse here, and apocalypse in its original Greek means revealing or unveiling. The apocalypse here is an unveiling of the past. And by revealing the hidden shape of history, we discover what we need to do differently this time. We don't live on the first earth. The first sun does not shine overhead. And for the Aztecs, the cosmic setting is dynamic, it's unstable, it's destructive. There's sharp alterations between order and disorder, life and death. And in this perpetual war happening right now between day and night, we, humanity, are both powerful and powerless. Because look, at the scale of the gods, depression and resentment destroy the world. In the divine realm, when grief turns to anger, it is a world-annihilating firestorm. In the Aztec account, we live in a world where divine destruction isn't punishment, it's not retribution, it's not judgment. The end of the world has nothing to do with us in many ways. We have repeatedly, effortlessly been destroyed as the side effects of rivalries in which we are entirely absent. There's no conflict between humanity and the gods. The gods are totally in control. One author says a crowded and hungry pantheon of divine entities. And in this space, our responsibility is to provide fuel for the gods. Humanity is a machine of divine support, and we prevent apocalypse number 5 by each doing our part to collectively sustain forces vastly beyond our control. That should be pointed out, this is done through human sacrifice and blood sacrifice. We support the conditions that make life possible. We don't have the power to directly affect change, but we're also not powerless exactly. There's no individual heroism, but all of us together make a collective sacrifice that makes a difference. Individually, none of us hold back the night. Collectively, we all do. And that story, which is maybe empowering, maybe hopeful, also has a question underneath. Is this much blood worth it to maintain the status quo? The gift to the gods of the divine animating energy of still beating human hearts, the smaller scale self-bloodletting by the tens of thousands, all of this just preserves the world as it is. There's no amount of sacrifice that prevents the need for more sacrifice. And we run as fast as we can, merely not to fall behind. That's the first apocalypse for today.
Wow. I don't have any long names to pronounce, so you did an amazing job. So the chalice is a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. It is a cup of life, a cup of sustenance to quench our spirit's thirst, a cup of celebration and resolve, a flame of hope and light to warm our souls and to guide us home. I'd like to invite Monica English to light this morning's chalice.
Hello. A slight break from the apocalypse. My name is Monica English, and I have been a member here since fall of 2020. I am a mother, a gardener, a queer person, a singer, and a lover of the outdoors, among other things, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I had never even heard of Unitarian Universalism until 2019, when a person I was dating asked me if I'd like to come to church with her at Foothills Unitarian in Fort Collins. I cautiously agreed to go, wanting to understand more about what was important to her. I was not prepared for the impact of hearing an openly gay minister preach. Many of the details of the sermon have blurred over time, but I remember Reverend Sean Neil Barron saying that every single one of us was wanted and needed there, just as we were. Those words went straight to my heart. Being raised Catholic, it often felt like the church was asking people to make themselves smaller, cut off, or ignore parts of themselves. Much the opposite of this welcoming of whole people. From then on, I felt excited about the idea of a church where I could be my full self, and so could the people around me. Shortly thereafter, I did a quick Google search to see if there was a UU church closer to my home, and I found UUCB. The romantic relationship that introduced me to Unitarian Universalism was not the right one for me much longer, but I am grateful that it led me where it did. I started attending UUCB when I could, each week Fred and Barb Cole would greet me and made me feel so welcomed here. Reverend Eric Poza was the interim minister at the time, and I soon realized that this church was in a time of great change. Nonetheless, each time I came, people remembered me and said hello, and I gleaned something valuable from the sermon. When the pandemic turned life upside down, I was so grateful to have the community and support of our online services. I decided to become a member, and in the fall of 2020, I was the first new member that Reverend Jeremy Nickel welcomed into the church. I remember meeting with him and Robin Miller in the parking lot, smiling behind our masks, so happy to be connecting in person. In the time since then, we've welcomed our wonderful settled minister, Reverend David Schwartz. We've done various arrangements of online and in-person services. I've attended a few sessions of our Soul Matters groups and found them incredibly valuable and connective. If I'm honest, the last couple of years have been too busy and disorienting for me. I've had a lot of changes and challenges in my personal life, and I haven't been here as much as I would have imagined. But I am glad to have been able to make it more often recently and to feel more connected to you all again. The theme of welcome keeps repeating for me. As Reverend Sean welcomed me, as this church has welcomed me, as we welcome spring and growth and whatever's coming next. As a practice, I try to live my life welcoming as much of myself as I can in each present moment, and welcoming others that way as well. I light the chalice this morning in honor of welcome. May we be welcoming, may we feel welcomed.
We are a promise-making, a promise-breaking, and a promise-remaking people. We are called not to be perfect, but to be faithful. In that spirit, each week we speak our covenant aloud, all together. It's a reminder of the promises we make in this gathered community. In person and online, will you join as one and say our covenant? We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Let me tell you about the end of the world. In the oldest collection of the Buddha's teachings, he speaks about the end of civilization and its rebirth. Real power, the Buddha taught, comes from understanding the relationship between self and world, living virtuously, carrying out spiritual practices, steadily produces insight that in turn allows virtuous living. So it's central is this message that it shouldn't be a surprise. He starts his teaching on the decline of humanity by first encouraging us to be really steadfast in our meditation practice. He goes on to say this. He says, long ago, a wheel-turning king ruled over humanity in a utopia. He possessed a perfect wheel with 1,000 spokes. This is a traditional South Asian symbol of knowledge and insight and the sort of wisdom which understands and gives voice to truth, this wheel. When that monarch retired from his rule, the new king, his son, was dismayed that the wheel had just vanished. But the old ruler explained the wheel arises out of action. Not until the new ruler embodied virtuous conduct would it appear. And he did, and it did. Well, the cycle repeated itself through 7 virtuous wheel-turning kings until the 8th ignored the wisdom of his predecessor and just did whatever he felt like doing. By the time he realizes his error and tries to do right, it's too late. Poverty in the kingdom gives rise to theft so widespread that no amount of royal generosity can shift it. And when the king then turns to punishment, ordering execution for all thieves, the state-sanctioned violence breeds more violence, which in turn gives rise to hate and anger and greed. And at each step of this moral descent, human lifespans grow shorter, until at last, driven by hate and desire, we are born and mature and grow old and die all only in 10 years. And at its worst, when there's no longer even a word in human language for morality anymore, at its worst, there is a sword interval of 7 days in which people are unable to see each other as human anymore. And they kill their neighbors just as the hunter feels hatred for the beast he stalks, while others hide from the violence in deepest jungles and highest mountains. At the end of these 7 days, the survivors emerge saying, "It is only because we were addicted to our evil ways that we suffered the loss of our kindred. So let us now do good. What good thing can we do now?" And bit by incremental bit, they rediscover morality. First, they renounce killing, and then refraining from theft and lying and harsh speech and so on. Their lifespan grows, disease vanishes, virtuous conduct spreads outward from individual to society, and at last a new wheel-turning monarch appears to rule over 84,000 flourishing cities and towns, so close to each other, says the text, so close to each other, they're just one chicken flight away from the next. Presumably, chickens were no better flyers 2,500 years ago. Only then does the next Buddha awaken. Only once this change in society, only once this virtuous society has come to pass, does the next Buddha awaken and begin teaching the Buddha Maitreya, Buddha of the future. I appreciate this version in the Pali Canon, this oldest collection of teachings, because like the climate crisis, it is human agency, not supernatural, it's human agency, which is the cause of and the solution to the problem. In this apocalypse, the potential for societal failure and for societal recovery exists simultaneously inside of all of us. Through 7 generations of just kings, the seeds of destruction were waiting. But even in the 7 sword days of violence, the seeds of right action were also still present. We're not all irredeemable, nor does salvation arrive externally for us. We have within us the tools to change our world for the better. But we also won't necessarily use them until things get so horrifically bad. Nor will all of us be able to act on them. The Buddha's telling here serves as a warning. You and I can fall away from right action. We can ignore the clear wisdom of generations. And we're not safe from correcting our mistakes too late with cures worse than the cause. Any day can potentially become a sword interval in our own lives where we're unable to distinguish each other as real, as human. And we destroy each other without even understanding it as a moral violation. Collapse and destruction is not judgment on us, it's consequence. Nor in this story is destruction necessary as part of a larger plan to fix us. 7 kings did just fine following those precepts. Presumably that could have continued. And this also isn't the end of history. The world continues, eternally impermanent. Neither the righteous ruler nor the Buddha Maitreya's arrival are an end to the cycles of history. In this apocalypse, our work is to live with right thought and right action, trusting it's going to influence far beyond us. And none of us can save the world. But all of us together can and will. A century ago, the Unitarian minister Edward Everett Hale put that sentiment like this. He said, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can." Take a breath with me. As we begin this moment of prayer and meditation, I invite you to call to mind someone from your life, past or present, someone who for you has been a mentor or a teacher, a guide. Someone you may not have seen for years or decades, but whose words or actions, whose presence in your life shaped the choices that you make, shaped the way that you are in the world. I invite you, call them to mind and see their face as best you can. Feel their presence nearby as if they were sitting next to you. And for a few moments of silence, let's just rest in that quiet company. Amen. None of us are alone, though it doesn't always feel that way. But there is a thread which weaves through this community, a fiber of compassion that comes from knowing and holding and transforming suffering. And it ties us together, connects all of us, every heart breaking with joy or breaking with sorrow. And so each week in the service, we set aside time in ritual to make visible these unseen interconnections of our hopes and our concerns. For you gathered in person, in a few moments as the music begins, I invite you to come forward as you feel moved. And as you wait, let your thinking quiet and your breath steady. call to mind the sorrows and the joys that weigh you down, that lift you up. And then silently take a stone in token of everything on your heart and place it into the earth, or into the container here where the children in their class this morning at 9 placed their stones. Resting together with each other, resting in something larger than any of us, a community connected by the concerns we carry. And for all our joy and sadness, we hold this space in love and in solidarity. And please come forward as you feel moved.
Sanctus es vivificando forma
Let me tell you about the end of the world. In Scandinavian mythology, 3 years of continuous, sunless winter heralds the doom of the gods, Ragnarok. And a poet seer prophesies that in the 3 years of war which followed the 3 years of winter, brother will struggle and slaughter each other. And sisters' sons spoil kinship's bonds. Axe age, blade age, shields are split. Wind age, wolf age, before the world crumbles, no one shall spare another. The world tree, Yggdrasil, which grows through and unites the whole of the cosmos, shudders and groans, and the world serpent, Jormungandr, who circles the edges of the earth, writhes and sends tidal waves across every land, while also blowing a poisonous venom through all the air and water. It gets much worse. Evil creatures converge, an army of ice giants, Fenris wolf, whose lower jaw is the earth and upper jaw is the sky. The ship Nalfgar, crewed by monsters, sails, made from the fingernails of the dead, which I'm sorry for saying that sentence. And not until this horde is almost upon them do the gods finally convene in council to figure out what to do. And they organize themselves and ride out to fight, and in a heroic and doomed battle, they die one by one. Odin swallowed whole by Fenris wolf. Thor defeats the world serpent, but is poisoned by it and walks away 9 steps before keeling over dead. With a flaming sword, the giant Surtur slays Freyr, the god of peace and harvest and sunshine and prosperity, dead. The wolves Skoll and Hati, who have eternally pursued the sun and moon, hence the cycle of day and night, finally catch up with them and devour them both. The poet says the sun turns black, land sinks into sea, the bright stars scattered from the sky. Flames flicker up against the world tree, fire flies high against heaven itself. The old world is gone, and the old gods are dead, And the few surviving gods watch a new world rise up out of the water, and the last two humans, Leaf and Leaf Thrasir, who have been hiding, become the first two humans under the light of a new sun. There's only one more apocalypse to get through after this. You're doing good. In this story, gods and humans are powerless to stop an inevitable ending. As in Aztec tradition, this apocalypse is a function entirely of non-human forces. So while the long winter and the wars devastate humanity, there's no causal relationship between things that people do and the demise of earth and gods. The human conflict echoes, but it doesn't cause the divine conflict. And likewise, no human agency brings rebirth afterwards, not through appeasement or sacrifice or personal righteousness do Leaf and Leaf Thrasir re-emerge to repopulate the world. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, and we are all adrift, and the wolf age is inevitable. But shift your point of view in that story. Shift. Instead of identifying with the humans, identify with the gods. The story changes. While the world dies in war and snow and darkness, while the seas rise over the land and poisons fill the air, while an army of evil approaches, the gods are oblivious. Safe in their own hall, they take no action until catastrophe is on their doorstep, on our doorstep, and only then do they go forth, knowing it means death, knowing that in their battle they create the conditions for the rebirth of humanity, and they may not live to see it. Nonetheless, it's worth spending their lives on. What I hear in that story, friends, is that like them, we did not act. And now climate catastrophe is like an army of monsters gathering outside the safe hall where we slept. And it may be too late for us to live in a world wholly remade, but it's not too late to spend our time remaking it for a future humanity, or at least creating the conditions of possibility for the future. Let me tell you about the end of the world. In the Christian tradition, the book of Revelation recounts a vision of things to come. I wasn't raised Christian. I grew up Unitarian Universalist. And so I don't come to this story with maybe some of the weight or the teaching or the association that some of you might have. You might have come out of a tradition where there were very clear and definite explanations of what this thing meant. But I invite you to hear it as we've heard these other apocalypses, to hear it with fresh ears. Before the throne of God, surrounded by angels and animals and wise rulers and odd-looking creatures, a scroll with 7 seals is opened. And as each seal breaks, some fresh new tribulation comes to humanity. The first 4 reveal horsemen who bring with them war and destruction and famine and chaos. The 5th seal shows the souls of the martyred dead crying for vengeance. But they get told to wait on vengeance because much worse things are coming. The 6th seal brings earthquakes and a shower of falling stars, and every mountain and island moves, and the survivors hiding in caves pray for death. The 7th seal fills everything with silence for a little while until an angel throws a censer of fire to earth, causing further destruction. 7 angels blow 7 trumpets, and with each one of them a new horror emerges. A star fallen from heaven opens the bottomless pit, whose smoke darkens the sky, and from which a plague of locusts with human faces spread across the earth to harm anyone not marked with the seal of God. A dragon with 7 heads throws a third of the stars down to earth. A beast emerges from the sea, ruling the world, waging war on the faithful. A second beast emerges from the earth, marking its followers, directing them to venerate beast number 1. 7 angels pour new plagues onto earth. And the sea turns to blood, and everything in it dies, and the sun burns the earth until a total darkness descends. But then, in this story, a turning. The new Babylon ruled by the beast is destroyed, though all the world mourns its destruction. The beast is cast into a lake of fire. The dragon is imprisoned in a bottomless pit. And all the faithful dead martyrs are resurrected to live with Christ for 1,000 years. And after that interval, loose ends are tied up. A new world is made. The dragon emerges but is defeated and cast in the lake of fire. God judges all of humanity. Evil ones go in the lake of fire. A new heaven and a new earth replaces ours. A world without suffering or death, where God dwells among humanity. Sin is ended, and a river of life and a tree of life bring healing to all. What are we to make of all of this? Is that a call to hope or to despair? Is this a call to action we need to take, or an admonishment that nothing is in our control? So in recent centuries, there have been a few different ways to read this text. Many people read Revelation as a description of the future. This is the definitive, symbolic account of inevitable events that we are powerless to influence. Destruction, salvation, this just happens to us. And our task, if there is one, is just to find out, where do we fit inside this plan? Some communities read Revelation as a joyful description of how their enemies will be destroyed. And they map Babylon onto nations and look for the Antichrist among contemporary politicians and watch technological developments trying to find the mark of the beast. But when you read Revelation in the context of current events, and you already know that you're the good guys, the text just becomes all the proof you need to consider whatever persecutions, whatever crusades you are already on. This becomes one more piece of evidence that you are right. On the other hand, there are some Christian communities who say the point of this apocalypse is not catastrophe for our enemy. I don't mean to gesture to not catastrophe for our enemies, who are apparently Monica and Deborah. No. Sorry. It's not about catastrophe for our enemies, it's about triumph for our friends. So sure, there's trial and tribulation, but let's not rejoice in the downfall of our enemies, because what really matters is this risen and reborn world at the end of all of this. The world dies, but the relevant point is global resurrection. But here's the thing with both of those interpretations, say our Unitarian and our Universalist ancestors. They say, whether you read Revelation as the downfall of your enemies or the triumph of your friends, pessimistic or optimistic, on both of these readings, we are entirely powerless. For many Christians, the work here is for Jesus to do. Our efforts are irrelevant. But for our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors, the real question about this story is not who wins and who loses. The real question was, what are we supposed to do in light of that? Apocalypse for them, like climate apocalypse for us, was a story about the need to point ourselves toward the end goal, to point ourselves toward the destination, toward a world made new, and then get to work making it new. The Universalist minister Clarence Skinner opens his book a century ago, The Social Implications of Universalism, by asking, how to he just says how, but I think if he was preaching it, he would probably say, how to transform this old earth into kingdom of heaven. That is the primal question. And then gives this good jab that still feels sharp. He says, he doesn't say listen, but I'm adding that. Listen, for 1,600 years, theologians have waged battle over the person of Christ and been totally blinded to his program. That is, each of us taking seriously the inherent worth and dignity of every person, without exception, without condition. We, each of us, already are beloved and belonging exactly as we are. And if that's true, and it is, well, we better get to work making that real in the world. For them, the point of Apocalypse is to reveal the contrast between the actual state of the world, not great, and the possible state of the world. That's what we sang earlier this morning in that hymn, Hail the Glorious Golden City. Imagining this metaphorical city of justice populated by the wise and the righteous, it then goes on to say, we are builders of that city. All of our lives, all of our groans help to rear its shining ramparts. All of our lives are building stones. Precisely because we do not know every detail of how to make the journey from justice, the journey to justice from despair, we better get to work. We have the power to act, and what we do makes a difference. It's an agnostic hope. An agnostic hope. We don't know our impact, but we don't need to know it before trusting that what we do makes a difference. Apocalypse. Apocalypse in its original Greek means revelation or disclosing or unveiling. A vision not of ending, but of what lies past the horizon of time that we can't imagine. What becomes visible? What answer will we give to a climate nihilism which says there is nothing on the far side of catastrophe? Because we do live in a broken and a breaking world. At this moment, already half of all algae and half of all coral reefs are gone. Already, half of all animals on land and half of all living things in the ocean are gone. This has already happened. This is in the past. The meaning-making work, our meaning-making work in this moment, is to figure out what story do we belong to, and how will we tell it? In the ruins of earth, we are responsible for choosing our guides. We get to choose which apocalypse will we live into, individually powerless or individually empowered, collectively effective or collectively irrelevant. Will we find redemption from without and we just sit tight, or will we find redemption from within, a future alone or together? Which apocalypse will we live into? Do we go home and pray for the destruction of our enemies gleefully? Or do we do the modern day equivalent of dressing in sackcloth and ashes, which I think is stockpiling food and ammunition for an ending we are powerless to prevent? Each of these apocalypse stories, each different reading of the same story, speaks to dimensions of that spiritual or emotional experience of climate crisis. With the Aztecs, we feel at times wholly powerless with world destruction out of our control, and yet we see that our little bit of effort makes a difference combined, even as we despair at an unjust status quo. Like the Buddhists, we watch our leaders' failure of moral nerve engender planetary collapse. And we name honestly that any one of us could lose our way. and that any of us can emerge from the grieving caves of our soul to see each other as human once again, to make a turning. Like the Scandinavians, we live in a world whose destruction is embodied in forces meaninglessly larger than our individual lives. And we despair the long night, and we hope for a human future, even if none of us make it through. And like our universalist ancestors, we are called to start where we are, to use what we have, and to do what we can with faith that the seeds we plant matter, with an agnostic hope, even if we can't know how it will turn out. Even in the face of destruction, we feel all of it. And then we get to work building the world we dream of. Let's go to that place together. Will you rise in body or in spirit? Let's close in song.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. Freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
This month, we share our plate with the Agrivoltaic Learning Center at Jack's Solar Garden. As an aside, one of the panelists at the Conference on World Affairs actually mentioned this organization as part of suggestions and possibilities for the future. So again, that sense of the kinds of things we're supporting are really important. Last week, we learned how gardening under solar panels can use our land to provide clean energy and grow crops more productively. This week, we'll learn that people and livestock, as well as plants, can coexist and thrive while grazing under and between the panels. I'm looking for...
Crops aren't the only beneficiaries of agrivoltaics. Livestock and people can benefit from solar panels too. Elevated panels allow people and animals to move more freely throughout a solar array. Shade from panels can reduce temperatures by several degrees and can prevent livestock from overheating. Heat-stressed cattle have lower immune functions, leading to an increase in disease and billions of dollars lost annually. But shaded cattle exhibit lower respiration rates and lower body temperatures. Shaded cattle eat more, and their growth efficiency is improved compared to animals in the full sun. Recent studies found that forage under solar panels is of higher quality, meaning more protein and higher energy content compared to open pastures. Additional data shows that farm workers are up to 35 times more likely to die from heat-related illness than workers in general. But people's skin can be 18 degrees cooler when working in agrivoltaics, which can prevent heat illnesses and deaths of farm laborers. Creating space for larger animals and people within a solar array will provide benefits to our agricultural industry.
The cool cow. Did you love the cool cow? Food currently produced under the panels is shared with the community. Produce collected there by the Longmont Food Rescue Group is delivered to nonprofits such as the Our Center, which provide free meals for the homeless and operate food banks for individuals and families who cannot afford grocery store prices. And 2% of the electricity produced is donated to low-income households through the Boulder County Housing Authority, enabling approximately 10 homes to receive free electricity bills for the next 20 years. In studying how best to use the land under solar panels, the Agrivoltaic Learning Center is discovering ways to make a healthier and more abundant future across the world while providing energy and food for our community, including local folks at risk. I invite you to give as generously as you're able. For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video description. For those gathered here in person, you can scan the QR code or make a donation as the ushers now pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community.
Thank you. Friends, if you are here for the first time this Sunday, let me tell you, we don't usually spend an hour and a half talking about the end of the world. And in fact, this Sunday service is incomplete without the service that follows next Sunday, the service of the Climate Action Ministry team, where I'll be joined by them and so many folks in asking, what does it look like to get ourselves empowered? What does it mean now to take action, the way we just heard about, and others. That'll be followed by lunch I'm so looking forward to, so I hope you can be here and be a part of that next week too. The philosopher Alistair MacIntyre says, I can only answer the question, what am I to do, if I can also answer the question, of what stories do I find myself a part? In this moment, we are a people choosing our guides, choosing what sort of stories we are a part of, choosing a future, choosing hope, choosing empowerment without naivete, without cynicism, but with agnostic hope. Will you rise in body or in spirit? We'll close in song.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way.